Cerebral Palsy Sunrise, what is going on? It is Nathan and Dr. Fynan, and we are finally here. I told you at 1 o'clock, I told you we would be back. So we are keeping our word. All the life circumstances are taken care of, and we are going to dive in today and talk about part 2 of sex. Let's talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so let me throw up our first question here, and it is this right here. So, Michelle, what is your biggest takeaway from last week?
I had such a blast hanging out with you in this group last week. The chat box was booming, and I always get so much out of talking with people about this topic, because as much as I'm able to support other people where they're at, other people just hold space for me to be human and have my own layers of the onion, if you will, to peel back. And it's always a great reflection to me of like, the work continues, Michelle, stay fierce. And that's really where I was at the end of our talk. That was my biggest takeaway. How about you?
How about me? So actually, I like the fact that you went first, because you made me think of the idea that, doing this, whether it's you guys in the audience or it's Michelle, that talking to other people and just sharing experiences is so important. And my biggest takeaway, honestly, is everybody's openness to even talk about this. Like, we're just two strangers on the internet, and you guys were open and honest with what shows up for you. And I think that's really what we focus on as coaches is we're about doing the work for ourselves, because if I'm not willing to be open and vulnerable with you, why should I expect you to do the same with me? So that's a huge takeaway for me. And I see we've got several people joining. I see John has joined. Hey, John, and hey, Jody. Great to see you.
Awesome.
So that's my biggest takeaway, and we'd love to hear from you guys too. If you watched the first video or you joined us live, what was your biggest takeaway from the conversation? Well, we'd love to hear from you guys, and I'm sure there's going to be some amazing gems that you guys drop as well. So, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I love what you shared about your biggest takeaway. And I think it speaks to kind of where we're going with our conversation today, which I'm super excited about.
Yeah, guys. So you heard me talk about, even before we started this, when Michelle said she was coming on, I said I was going to be open to some coaching. And before we even started today, she said, do you want to know the questions I'm going to ask you? She started to ask me. I was like, I don't want to know. I just want it to
brave soul.
be natural, and whatever comes up, comes up. And that's really what it's about. So I think before we dive into any of that, right, let's talk about who we are for anybody who's new and why is this important to us. So I will let ladies go first. But before I do that, you caught me with something when you said stay fierce. That's why you wore the leopard print today, right?
Yes, absolutely. And and I think unconsciously it was. I'm like, I got to be fierce for this conversation. But, and it's also because I am open to your coaching as well. You create safe spaces for my growth. And I know that I'm always going to get a shifted perspective when you and I talk about things too. So I'm staying fierce, and I too am ready for the shifts that can happen here. So with that, I'll introduce myself. My name is Dr. Michelle Fynan. I have my PhD in clinical sexology, and I am a relationship and intimacy coach. And what I really, my purpose, my why, I like going alongside people and helping them have those shifts for themselves when it comes to their ability to have great love, great relationships, great sex, and just all of it. And my specialty is working with people who have disabilities. I myself am a person with a physical disability. And for a long time, I didn't believe that I could have all of those things. So I can really relate to that space. And because of that, I feel like it's my superpower to kind of shine the light of like, no, we're going this way, and it can totally be possible. So that's a little bit about me. How about you, Mr. Nathan Todd?
Yeah, guys. Well, I'm in here. I'm a moderator, so I've got cerebral palsy. Shocker. And it's funny. I was just talking to somebody about this before we hopped on too, and they were asking why I got into the realm of connection. And so I really got into it because first and foremost, when I think about my coaching, if I could serve anyone, it would be people within our community. And that's because I know the realization of coaching and things like that aren't often offered as possibilities for our community. But I had a coach one time, and he asked me, he said, what's the thing you think your friends need? They have a problem with and they need help solving. And I said, I think we are all looking for connection, and we stay at the surface level most of the time. We talk about the weather, we talk about sports, we go out and drink. And then when we really need the support of people, we don't have the skills to ask the scary questions. And that's really what all this is, right? Whether it's self-esteem, whether it's sexual self-esteem, let's be for real. A lot of people are probably sitting there thinking, man, this is a scary topic. I don't know if I want to go here and find the answer. And so I know that people are so much more than they often give themselves credit for. But it's in that reality of, if somebody says, how are you doing? And they say, fine. Usually it's not fine. Usually that means that something's fucked up. That's what I like to say. Fine equals fucked up. So, and it's about digging deeper into what's actually going on. And so that's why I'm passionate about connection. And I know that for us as a community, our labels get in the way of our connection all the time.
Absolutely. And I think, for some of us, we've got multiple labels, right, that are put there by other people. So then there's even that level of like not feeling in control of like these labels that are slapped on you.
Yeah. And that's really what we're seeking, right? A lot of the times is we want to be in control of everything. And guess what? That's not realistic. There's very few things that we actually have control over. And I think it's about finding that acceptance of that fact that gives a little bit of freedom.
Absolutely.
Whew, going deep real quick already.
It's the way we do things. It's the way it goes here. And I think too, things being out of control, if we attach a negative connotation to that and attach fear to that, then we don't have these conversations, right? But in finding other people and in being brave and opening up that line of communication and that opportunity for connection, we then hold that space for the difficult conversations. And I mean, with you, Nathan, you are just very skilled at doing that. So there's a level of safety there of like, all right, let's dive deep then, because I'm diving with a dive master now. It's not just me and my snorkel and me, relying on this little flashlight anymore. I actually have someone who's with me who knows the lay of the land down there. And I think that's what a good coach does and does for us.
I'm wearing the right shirt because it's a Hawaiian shirt. So we definitely can go snorkeling in Hawaii. So
I'm down for that. That's for sure.
Yeah, right. I think we're all down for that at this point in the COVID era of life for sure. So yeah, let's continue the conversation and make sure if you guys have questions that come up as you hear the conversation or you have things you want to add, make sure and put your comments. We are checking what everybody's saying, and we want you guys to be a part of the conversation. We don't just want it to be us talking. We hear enough of ourselves all the time, so we want you to be a part of it. But where are we with esteem?
John.
Oh, what did he say?
Ugh. Hi, John. We see you. Hey, Bill. Hey, Charles. Hey, Jody. It can be a lot, but we're here. We're here to talk it out. So
yeah.
So let's go there.
Yeah. So guess what? I'll go first. I'll let you put me through the ringer first, and you can ask me whatever questions. One thing though, before we dive there, I think this is important because you guys have been asking a lot of questions through the week, and I think this is important because there was comments about LGBTQ and having relationships and having conversations around what that is like as well. And I want you to know we heard you, and we're working on getting other people to be a part of the conversation to offer that perspective as well. But I just wanted to throw that out so you guys know that we're hearing you, and everything we're offering is just from our experience. So we hear you, and we want you to be a part of the conversation too.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's where we're going with our next conversation. And then, if you didn't have a chance to check out our first conversation, we talked about the difference between self-esteem and then sexual self-esteem. And you can go back and listen to that one to see what came through for us. But the nitty-gritty is that you could be really pretty good with self-esteem, but then find that when it comes to viewing yourself as a confident sexual being, that you might be a little bit lower on that continuum when we're like scaling it here. Let's see. Ben says, how do you someone to know that you need help, but not make them turn away because you need help and think that they would be a caregiver in the relationship. Oh, this is great, Ben, because that's a concern that comes up for those of us with physical disabilities if we do need a bit of help. And when we're looking at our sexual self-esteem, that is a quality that interferes with our ability to see ourselves in the light that we want to be. So what Nathan and I decided we were going to do today was we were going to kind of show how we would have a coaching session about this topic, this sexual self-esteem topic. So what I would encourage you all to do is to, as Nathan is kind of being walked through the session bravely, reflect on it for yourself as I'm asking these reflection questions, and share in the chat box what comes up for you, and we can have it be a discussion, and we can kind of go from there. Does that sound good?
We'll see after you start asking the questions.
Okay. So our sexual self-esteem, our bodies our physical being, that's where self-esteem and sexual self-esteem, like our desire, our sexuality, that's where everything comes together in our bodies. So as someone who has a physical disability, that can be a bit of a disconnect because we become very skilled at disconnecting from our body at times because of physical pain or just because of wanting to push it away. So the more we're able to safely get in touch with this concept of sexual self-esteem, the better we're going to be with intimacy, with self-esteem, and just having a positive impact overall on our sexuality. So we have to kind of set the stage with that. Now, for people with disabilities, negative attitudes about disability, a lack of opportunity, those thoughts of like, how do I have someone not think that they're going to be my caregiver? Those maybe even social isolation. You mentioned that, granted with COVID, but even before COVID, a lot of people have isolation going on, which leads to loneliness, which leads to low sexual self-esteem. So ultimately, there's a strong correlation between our ability to improve our sexual self-esteem by having these types of talks and having better life satisfaction overall. So I don't have to sell you on the idea of this being an important conversation. I know that you already believe it, but for those who are in the chat, maybe thinking like, why are we talking about this? Or why do I need to go inward? That could be a reason. So I'm going to ask you some questions, Nathan.
Oh boy. Yep.
Yes. So we, as you know, as a coach, we play tapes in our head. We've got some negative self-talk going on. We've got those labels that are slapped on us. These things are shaped by society, culture, family, friends, ourselves, right? So when you think about your sexual self-esteem, what messages, if you're going to really, and again, it requires going into the body, right? So just preface. You're going in.
I already knew this was happening, so we're good to go.
We're going in. What messages play that are in the back of your head? Tell me.
Yeah, so first off, relate a lot to Ben, for sure. And that type of message was really early on. But it's, again, I talked about this last week too, and it's a reality, the idea of being the best friend, the almost like the little brother. And no dude wants to be the little brother. Let's be for real. But that's what the repeated message was at the time when all my other friends were dating and everything. And I was like, how do I break through this? And then I'll never forget this. And the funny thing is, my dad was doing like what he thought was good because he was a teacher at my school. And so he got some girl who was a senior to come sit with me at lunch. And like, I don't know what he thought was going to happen. But it was like, oh, this is weird. Like, this is awkward. But so I don't, I'll never forget that the rest of my life. Like, I can go right back there. And also, like, having the birds and the bees talk, right? Like, I remember having that actual talk, but then in reality, as I was going through life, when I was just by myself, I was like, okay, that's cool, but I don't see how this applies to what I'm actually seeing happen. And again, my parents don't really get what's happening, and I don't know how to explain it in a way where they can. I don't think they can because it's not their experience. So, I mean, it's just like, it's always the idea of, okay, how is this going to happen? And then I think I got where I started focusing on other things and put all this to the back burner and being like, okay, I'm going to be successful in my career.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to be really good at what I fucking do.
Yeah. Yeah. And so let's get clear. Let's take it a step further and say, okay, so you mentioned the fear of being everybody's like fun little brother and like friend, right? And for those who missed it last week, I had mentioned, you know, even myself being the mayor of Friendville, like, you know, so I feel you on that. And then with what you said your dad was doing, where it was, you know, he's going to get this girl to sit with you. Tell me the message that plays when you go immediately back to that time.
Yeah, like I think just having you repeat that, it was, nobody is going to sit with me because of me.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Somebody has to step in and get someone somehow to sit with me.
And honestly, here's what I was also thinking. That I was like, I don't even like this. I don't even like you.
Right. So then you're like in this space with someone that you maybe wouldn't have even chosen to sit with.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Right. So
Again,
the message,
the control thing, right?
right.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a lot of like people who are doing what they think is best for us, right? And they're doing the best that they can, but maybe it's missing the mark. And because of that, there's some labels of, you know, not good enough or friend zone or whatever for that. And then what's interesting too is instead of focusing your attention on it, you said, I'm going to be damn good about this area in my life, right? And that I did the opposite, where now I wasn't working on my self-esteem as my career, like, and who I was as like adult Michelle. I instead was looking at like, how am I going to get the guy, right? And how am I going to improve sexual self-esteem? So I became damn good at that, and the ability to kind of teach other people how to then do that in their own life. So it's important what I'm kind of helping Nathan through right here, and he's bringing himself through. It's that idea of, where am I at currently with my sexual self-esteem? Now, let me ask you, that little brother energy, do you feel like you're still in that?
Yeah, I would say I'd be at a 1 to 2.
Currently.
Yeah. No
Currently.
joke. Yep. 100%.
Do you hear that, friends? So, and would we ever know this about Nathan? Probably not, right? That just goes to show you, it doesn't matter how confident this person is coming across. He's saying, no, I'm like a 1 over here when it comes to sexual self-esteem. So let me ask you this now. When you think about someone who has high sexual self-esteem, what does that look like? Like, what does a 10 look like? If you're the 1, tell me about 10.
Oh, yeah. So, okay, what do I see? This is weird, but this is what I see, and I don't know why this is coming up, right? But it's what's coming up. So, because it has nothing actually to do with sex or anything, but when I imagine that, the person that I see is like Matthew McConaughey. Like, that's who I see.
Okay,
when I imagine that.
So like Matthew McConaughey is a 10 when it comes to sexual self-esteem. What are the qualities about him that really are like, this is why?
Well, so he just seems really sure of himself. which is funny, right? Because it's just this area, and we've talked about this. I'm sure of myself, but not in this area.
Mm-hmm.
So I know what that's like.
Yep.
So sure of himself, doesn't, I get the sense that he doesn't care what other people say about him.
Mm-hmm.
He just says whatever is true to him. So
he speaks authentically. He shows up. Yep.
Yeah. And I think that's probably the biggest part of that for me is, how do I say that in a when it comes to relationships,
Right.
in a romantic way.
Right. And I'm seeing in the chat box that people are meeting you where you are at. They're doing the reflection for themselves and they're saying, I feel like I'm a one. I see same, you know.
Wait, why is John going to Vegas? That's what I want to know.
Oh, now I got. Oh, well, John was asking about sex surrogacy, which is truly a whole other topic. And it also depends legally on where you are at. So that is something to Google, and we can certainly have that discussion. But for now, and now that I know that's on your radar, I'm happy to talk about it at another time too. I think that that's important. Charles is saying, or Ben is saying, I feel like I'm at a 1. And Charles is saying, I'm a 10 with other people's disabilities. With other people with disabilities. Ooh, Charles, I love this. And then Charles says, I'm a 3 with able-bodied people. Yeah. So interesting. Bill says, I'm a 7. And Bill, is that with sexual self-esteem or is that self-esteem? And I would even add that interesting division there. How do you feel with other people with disabilities? How do you feel with people who have no physical disability? Because that's something to consider too. Now, getting back to Nathan, you didn't get out of it that easy, Nathan, which I know you're not trying to get out of it. You're not. So with that, what does a 1 look like?
So a 1 looks like not even making it a priority.
So it's not even on your radar, like, not making it a priority.
Yeah. It looks like, so when I think about it, I think it's something that we're very good at, and that's overcompensating, right? So I think it's just overcompensating in other areas, and just the 1 is not even worrying about that.
So not making it a priority.
And pretending like it doesn't matter.
So when we pretend that things don't matter, what does that do for us?
A lot. Yeah.
So level of importance for you, it's probably what on 1 to 10?
Yeah, 9 to 10.
It's the other end of the spectrum, right?
Yeah.
But by saying these things don't matter, it keeps us from getting hurt.
Yep.
Right? It keeps us safe. And 100%. Of course we want safety, but we have to choose our hard, right? So either we're safe and we're alone because we're not even making romantic relationships a priority, or we are putting ourselves out there, but potentially getting our hearts broken, right?
Yeah.
So let me ask you now, are you making this a priority today? Are you choosing to from here on out? Yeah. 100%. It sounds like it in this discussion. So then you're no longer a 1. Where are you?
Okay, that's a difficult question. So if I'm not a 1, I mean, we're aiming towards a 10. But if I'm preaching if I'm doing what I preach, we're trying to get to a 2 or a 3.
Yeah. So where are you? Are you maybe a 2 or a 3?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I think that's the goal of changing today would be to be at a 3,
Yeah.
4.
And the goal is that because we're looking at realistic
Yeah.
shifts, right?
And it's like right now, I'm like, okay, now I'm managing even like the pandemic, right? I'm like, okay, so how do we do this? What does this look like in this space when I don't even have a lot of the skills? Like, because that's really what it requires too. And this is for everybody. Like, it requires repping it out. So that's a reality of making sure you're not saying, okay, I'm going to be a 10. Well, you don't have the skills to be a 10.
I felt that. I felt that, Nathan, because I think that is like sometimes a little white lie that we tell ourselves.
Okay.
Because I believe you have the skills to be a 10, but you've told yourself that you don't because it's this arena here. But if we're looking at self-esteem, are you not Matthew McConaughey right now?
Oh, yeah.
Right. So you are showing up authentically for friendships and connection. You
Yeah.
are confident and you're not caring about what other people think. And I know that because I, at times, am over here caring about what other people think. And you're like, don't do that. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
you even kind of have the accent, Matthew McConaughey. So I'm just saying. But that is where, and I think that it's so great that you said that. And even in the chat box, Bill is saying the key is to be a friend for me. That's what we're being in romantic relationships too. That's ultimately what we're being. Now, it's a lens though, because where does sexy fit into that?
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, outside of the coaching lens of that, that's often something that I think about too. And it's like, I guess it's still in the coaching lens a little. So, like, I think the friend zone idea, like, I think that's also just a made up idea. Like, I would much rather be your friend before I just said, hey, let's get it on. Like, that's just like my
Right?
personality. But I also see points where that can also be like a white lie too.
Mm. Mm-hmm. So
Like,
tell me about that lie.
so that to me is, am I clear with the intentions that I have with the person?
Right. Right. And in getting clear on those things, we have to first get clear on what do you want
Yeah.
in a relationship. Now, if you're at a 1, you're not even acknowledging the fact that you can have a relationship. So if you've recently been a 1 or you're currently at a 1, we really have to start at looking at how do we shift to a 2 where we're acknowledging that this could even be a possibility.
Yeah. And so for me, like, I think that looks like an actual affirmation. Honestly, I think that's where that starts, is saying something to the effect of, I'm worthy of
Mm-hmm.
a romantic relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna make my job really hard when it's my turn. I'm just saying.
You're welcome.
Yeah, yeah.
But
So I think that's it, though. I think that's the one step that will start to get to that 3 and that 4.
welcome to 2.
Yeah.
It's better here than 1, but 1's okay if you're at a 1 and if you're just not ready. That's a choice. But if we could even all just kind of shift into what a 2 feels like, what feels better about 2 than 1?
I mean, for me, it's you're closer to the 10.
You're almost there.
Yeah. You only got 8 more to go.
And look how fast we got to 2.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about that for a second, because I think that's important too. Like, I think that there's a lie that this all takes tremendous amounts of time.
Yeah.
And none of this actually takes a lot of time. It's really about what choice are you willing to make in any given moment, regardless of what area we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if that's something that you're telling yourself, I think acknowledge where you're at, right? But it doesn't have to take forever.
It doesn't have to take forever. That's a lie too. And then that becomes an overwhelming of like, well, I don't even want to start. It's going to be a lot of hard work. Again, choose your hard.
Yeah.
You know, and you're making this conversation for me easy because I know that you are ready to receive this. You know, you went in with, don't even tell me your questions, Michelle. Like, I'm here, I'm present, and I'm open to possibility. And I think that if you can be open to possibility, I mean, that brings us back to our first conversation that we had together on your podcast of, you know, are you open to the idea that this can be something that you have? You know, that's something to look at. So I see that John's saying we're trying to quantify this topic. When we're looking at something that is not visible, like I can't say like, here is your anxiety, here is your depression, here is your self-esteem. When we're able to talk about it in terms of physicality by putting it on a scale, that's how you can get an idea of how you can shift it. And I think that being open to that possibility speaks to your openness of shifting other energy as well. So,
And I think it's important too, like with the scale, like you can't, I can just tell you what I'm feeling, right? And we can only quantify things in a certain way, and we have to have something that we can measure that says, oh yeah, I did improve here. So I think it's important because if you don't know, like you have to have something to measure it against. So now if I show up every day and I say my affirmation, I know that, hey, I improved and I said with integrity what I was going to do. I did it.
yeah. Yeah. And John, they are feelings based. And I think that sometimes that almost puts them in the level of like a magical realm. And we certainly don't want to take away that magic of what those things can be. But I think too, sometimes we can allow feelings in general to feel like fact. And if you're feeling like you're at a 1, but then we talk it out and you're not actually a 1, that improves the way that you're going to show up for these conversations and in relationships with other people. So it's great that you're open to that. Because that being open and being cracked open, that's the way we receive.
And I'll tell you, so one of the greatest things that I ever did do in this area was when it was like we had to draw a picture of our body as we saw it, and talk about all the things that we didn't like about our body. And let's be for real, when you have a physical disability, it's really easy. I mean, as a human, it's really easy to point out all the imperfections, but when you have stuff that's definitely not what you see on TV, it's really easy. But when I did that, and then so you drew it out, and then you talked about all the things you didn't like, but then what they made you do is we sat with our group and we said all the things we didn't like. I love my body for this reason, and it was for all the reasons why we didn't like our body to begin with, and it was a point of acceptance. And I think that's what all this stuff is. It starts with accepting where you're at and knowing where you want to go.
So with that, you know, we said we were gonna kind of walk through that type of a shift with sexual self-esteem? Did you want to have the tables turn?
Yeah, I think we can do that.
Or,
I mean, I would much rather want to hear what other people would like to talk about. I'm cool if we don't do that at this time, because I think this is we're in a good spot. And if we continue this conversation, I think it's important. So I don't think that we necessarily need to switch.
Okay, cool. Sean is saying, for some people living with disabilities, sex can help take away their physical pain. 100%. Yeah. From my experience, that can be a little addictive. Yeah. The lack of pain, sign me up, right? So it leaves you wanting more. And then on top of everything you're talking about, that makes it even more difficult. So talking about it makes it difficult. I'm a little unclear on that.
Wait, yeah. Talking about the pain, or what are we talking about?
On top of that, everything you're talking about that makes it more difficult. So yeah, some clarity there. And then I do want to hop back up here too and say what Ben was sharing here. My birthday active, I can hit on a girl and say everything in the world I want to say, but I feel like she's looking at my chair and thinking, how am I going to have sex with him? Oh, yeah, that is something, as someone who has used a chair for a good portion of my life. I think those of us who have can relate to getting people asking us that question, right? Of like, can you even have sex? And that was recently covered by the wheelchair Rapunzel on Instagram. She did a video about that and how many times people have asked her, like, can you? And I think that if you don't even know, that could be a really big thing too, and I think that speaks to having people in your life that show you what is possible. Having other people who have disabilities, who have even maybe your specific disability, talking about what's possible physically can be extremely helpful.
That's a good, so I don't know if you saw what Charles put too. I think that's a really good comment, Charles. I don't know what that would look like, but I think that, yeah, that's definitely something that's needed in schools to make it okay, right? Because I'm sure there's kids that go to sex ed, and I bet you some of their parents even pull them out just because they have a disability and they don't think that they should learn.
Yeah. That's a really big thing where, I mean, people with disabilities are just not being invited to that conversation, whether it's because parents are protecting them or there's this false belief that people with disabilities don't have sex. And there's a lot of ableist beliefs about that. And those things become internalized too, I think. And it can be hard for us to even grapple with that internalized ableism that we could even have. So yeah, I feel you on that, Charles, for sure. And I think that while we may not be able to go back and fix the fact that maybe we didn't have this conversation, that makes it that much more important for us to talk about it now and to have these types of discussions with people who are open to sharing where they're at. So I love the chat box and everyone who's shared just their perspective and where they're at.
So that actually makes me think of a question for you, though, from a different lens than we thought. That so you have daughters who also have disabilities. So when you think about this from a parent lens, what do you think is important for your kids to know? I mean, they're not close to even having these discussions yet, but what do you think about as a parent?
Yeah. And I think being a parent now, it really shows me that the sex talk is just kind of difficult to have with your child outside of the scope of disability. So parents are in a position where it's just difficult to have. It's hard to see your child as a sexual being, you know?
Mhm.
It's even harder for people who have children with disabilities to see them as a sexual being because of the care that has potentially gone on, the, sometimes lack of boundaries that are there, what society has told them. So it's an interesting dynamic. Now, for me to be a sexologist and acknowledge that this is a difficult discussion, I think speaks to the fact that like I've been taught how to have this discussion and it feels weird, you know? But I think age appropriate wise, it would always start with just like consent and understanding what it is. And then also as, you know, as developmentally appropriate, the fact that pleasure is involved and it's a part of it. And as we talked about in the chat box, pleasure can be a really big pain reducer here. So that's a benefit, you
Yeah.
know?
We're all getting hit up with the dopamine.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, so Charles is saying, I had to have the sex talk with my wife who has CP the first time we had sex. Yeah, she didn't know anything. And that's something that I want people to know. And I want to be able to answer those questions for people, even people who, like you said, she's 29 and didn't know. Like there are adults that we're having these conversations with, because if we're not told, how can we know?
That how can we be expected to know just because we're a certain age? Yeah.
Yeah, and then maybe we're getting bad information from friends or
Yeah.
the wrong information. So, always know your source as well. That's another researcher pro tip. Know your source,
Well, and yeah, so one of the things I think about is like the whole idea about the wheelchair. Like I think that a lot of times when people ask that question, and I've seen it even with other people with disabilities, just because they weren't taught, they made the assumption that this guy was in a wheelchair and he couldn't feel his legs, like, and we feel everything for the most part. We're not paralyzed. And I had to tell them in that moment, I was like, okay, we got to do a little educating here. Please don't try and do that with him, because he wasn't able to speak up for himself in that moment because he hadn't been taught to use his voice. And I'm like, you have to realize he can feel all that. So would you like to be dragged that way? No.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really like,
Mm-hmm.
again, I think that kind of dips into that self-esteem a little bit of, we have to be able to use our voice at whatever capacity we can to say what's going on for us, even if it's something that feels scary to say.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to be able to do that to like have a better, I don't even know, a better quality of life is what
Yeah.
I'll say.
Yeah. Better quality of life, better self-perception. Speaking your truth is such a big part of that, right? And if you don't know what feels good, you could at least maybe know what does not feel good, and being able to communicate that is such an important part of that.
And so that made me think of, if you're like at a 1 where I'm at, well, now what do we say? I'm at a 2. I'm at a 2.
You tell me. You tell us.
Yeah. So, but I think one of the important parts is when you find that partner or the potential partner is to be open and honest with them. Like, instead of thinking that they're going to make the assumption about what you don't know, or like if you're not experienced, guess what? It's not, the fact's not changing. It just is a truth. If you don't have a lot of experience, you don't. And I think when you say that, it helps the other person know where you're at, and it helps create an experience where you're in it together.
100%. And the more that if as the person with maybe a lack of experience, if we're looking at that through a negative lens where it's like, you know, you're going to present this lack of experience in that way. Whereas if we can shift into the idea that a lack of experience does not mean that things are going to be bad. If anything, if we can tap that into the idea of play and let's figure it out and have fun. I mean, who doesn't want to play? So, and really when you're with someone new, there's a level of play even if both of you have experience, because you're learning what the other likes, and everybody's not the same. So if you can tap into that feeling, and you know that you want to have fun and you're there for fun, that's going to be a whole different shift as well.
Whew. Man, I don't actually know what I expected from today's conversation, to be honest. I think it's been a good one, and I'm loving everybody's comments, the conversation. You guys are adding a lot to the conversation. Let me throw this up because we're coming to the end of our time here today, and just want to throw up, if you guys have any questions and you think about it before our time next week, feel free to email them here. You can also message the page, whatever works best for you. But if you send it to that email, I get them directly to the email, because next week we're doing a Q&A. And we're bringing another person, as I said, in the 1 o'clock hour, we're bringing another person to join the conversation, to add their perspective to everything that we've talked about. And next week is all about answering your questions and supporting you, and whatever that looks like. So what's your big takeaway from where we've ended up today, Michelle?
I think that a takeaway too, and it ties in with this Q&A. The best way for questions to get answered is for them to be clear and shared, so that we could really get a clear answer on what it is that we're looking for. You know, if you're looking, like John made a great point here, sex is one thing, relationship is another. If you're just looking for sex, that's one thing, you know? If you're looking for more than that, there's going to be deeper things that we kind of need to address here. But either way, sexual self-esteem affects how we show up to all of these different avenues. So I think it's important for us to get super clear, like what is your end goal with improving sexual self-esteem, and why? And then what is it that you're really wanting in a relationship, you know? So that's something to consider. Ben says, this has helped me so much. The funny part is I can't talk to my parents about this year, but I thought about, killing a counselor. I'm thinking that might be a typo, Ben, but I'm not sure. But the counselor doesn't understand unless they're in a wheelchair or they have a disability. So this is great. Yeah, I think there's a unique perspective that we can all share together when the person can appreciate the lens through which you're your questions asked. So that's something to consider as well. Yeah. And John, yeah, you got to be real with yourself. Like if you're, as John was saying in the chat box, if it's just to get laid, then you also have to consider the fact that, that is going to come across too.
Yeah.
And I would even push you a little bit further to see if you're thinking you just want to get laid because you're not worthy of love. Can you have both? Do you feel worthy of that? These are all reflection questions to start asking ourselves. And Sean said, if I ever do get a counselor, I would like one to be in a wheelchair so they can understand my perspective better. Yeah, I get that. I get it.
Yeah,
So
we all want to be seen, right? And that gives us a level of feeling seen, I believe. So, man, yeah, there's some powerful stuff here. And I think you're right. I think it depends on where we're at, what we actually want. And that's such a powerful question to be like, is that really true? And I think that goes back to having somebody else to bounce the conversation off of, because we're really good at lying to ourselves. Because guess what? We just want to survive. That's the only thing our brain wants to do. And so it's not going to go to the difficult places. It's going to say, oh, let's stay in our little bubble.
Yeah. Ben said, getting a counselor, not killing a counselor. Thank you for the clarification, Ben. Yeah, and I can appreciate that. So, with all that was shared today, I also want to say, as much as we do lie to ourselves, we should also be kind to ourselves. Like, thanks, brain, for lying for my survival. Thanks for doing this to keep me safe. But we can, I can maybe take the reins now, and we're going to kind of drive in this direction here. So I think it's, without judgment, that we can see where we're at in order to move forward. So please, if you've got any questions, if this sparked anything in you, also be kind to yourself. If this dug up some stuff and you're feeling all the feels, drink a lot of water, talk it out with a friend, connect with someone, continue the discussion, do some journaling, and be real with yourself and say, like, do I want to dig into this a little bit further for myself? Would that be helpful? That's where it's at.
Well, I would acknowledge you for taking the time leading me and everybody through the exercise. I hope you guys got a lot out of asking yourself the questions. And remember that this is going to be on replay. So if you didn't get something the first time, feel free to go back and watch it again, because it's there to support you. And we don't have a time in concrete yet for next week, because we're working with the other person to get that scheduled out. But as soon as we do have something, I will post in here when we have our final talk. And remember, you can ask any questions, and we will be getting to you next week Q&A. So the things that you asked, they're super important for next week's talk.
Yeah, you have a voice, and if you're feeling like you've got too many questions, get some of them out for yourself, because they're important. Yeah. They're there for a reason.
Yeah, 100%. And we're here for all the questions. And if we don't know the answer, we're going to be straight up and say, hey, I don't know. I haven't thought about this before. So I'm going to have to do some reflection too.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that, remember, risers, from sun up to sundown, we rise.
Thanks, everyone.